The sky above the Forge world is not a sky in any human sense. It is a lid of soot and incense smoke, stitched with gantries and crawler bridges that span whole districts like iron ribs. Cathedral foundries rise where mountains should be, their spires crowned with signal beacons and vox choirs that never sleep. Molten metal runs through open channels in bright, deliberate rivers, and servo skulls drift in slow processions over assembly lines that vanish into heat haze. Deep beneath the prayer smog, immense presses stamp armor plates the size of hab blocks, each impact a measured beat in an endless hymn. In orbit, a ship's keel is laid in a dock the size of a city, and the sound that rolls across the void is not thunder, but the chorus of machine tools biting into consecrated steel. Every piston stroke is a litany, every ignition is a sacrament, every data burst is a verse from an encrypted psalter, recited in binheric clicks and organ tones. Then the vision cuts to war, because the priesthood of Mars does not labor for peace. Across ash-choked ruins, Skitarii march in perfect cadence, their steps timed to a metronome implanted behind the eyes. Galvanic rifles crackle with hungry blue-white light, and the air smells of ozone and hot oil, sharp enough to bite the back of the throat. Onager dune crawlers grind forward on iron legs, indifferent to rubble, while Castellan robots, ancient, heavy, obedient, advance beneath hymn code and pre-approved protocols that have outlived dynasties. Their commanders do not shout so much as transmit. Target solutions, fire rites, clipped sequences of permission that ripple through the noosphere like a silent choir. It looks like discipline. It sounds like worship. It kills like mathematics. The Imperium calls these forces allies, yet the truth is older than politeness. In the Imperium, war is not merely fought, it is manufactured, maintained, and continuously re-sanctified. A rifle is not enough. It must be supplied, repaired, and kept in communion with its machine spirit. A void fleet does not simply sail. It must be tended by rites that calm reactor hearts and silence error spirits in cogitators. A crusade does not merely advance. It must be fed by sanctioned schemata, spare parts, and approvals carried like seals of office. That is why the Adeptus Mechanicus matters, not ornament on the Imperium's armor, but the foundry that makes the armor possible, and the priesthood that ensures it does not fail at the moment of need.
Praise the Omnissiah.
Mars was shaped by catastrophe long before it was bound to Terra. In humanity's distant golden ages, the Red Planet was a seat of industry and science so vast it could afford arrogance. Then came Old Night, warp storms, isolation, the collapse of interstellar unity, and 1,000,000 worlds were left to die alone. Mars endured by becoming something stranger than a surviving colony. Its tech cults turned necessity into dogma, because dogma can be preserved when libraries burn and empires shatter. Maintenance became prayer, repair became ritual, knowledge became relic, and what remained of ancient understanding was guarded as sacred inheritance, sealed behind oaths and data crypts. When the Emperor unified Terra, he inherited a world that could conquer continents, but not a galaxy. The Great Crusade required more than soldiers and ambition. It required shipyards, reactors, manufactoria, and the quiet mastery that keeps machines alive in the dark between stars. Mars, for its part, did not see Terra as a rival to be crushed. It saw destiny to be bound. Thus, the Treaty of Olympus was forged, an alliance written in steel and sealed in oath code, joining Terra's newborn Imperium to the Mechanicum's industrial might. It was a pact with consequences that still echo through 10,000 years. Mars would serve the Imperium. In return, Mars would remain Mars, semi-autonomous, doctrinal, jealous of its secrets, and permitted a theology all its own. From that pact grew an arrangement no later decree could truly undo. The Mechanicus builds much of what the Imperium uses, yet it does not think like a mere supplier. It thinks like a church safeguarding sacraments. Designs are guarded like holy texts, access mediated through rank, right, and sanction, and the wrong hands on the wrong data treated as profanation. Even after the ancient Mechanicum shattered in civil war during the galaxy's great betrayal, when loyalty and treachery tore the Red Priesthood apart, its loyal remnant endured as the Adeptus Mechanicus, integrated into the Imperium without being dissolved by it. Mars did not forget what it had been. It simply learned to survive inside a larger body, like a second heart beating to its own rhythm. At the core of that heart is the cult Mechanicus, a faith that treats function as sacred and ignorance as sin. They speak of the machine god, the divine totality of true knowledge and perfect mechanism. They speak of the motive force, the holy current that animates engines and sparks and systems. They speak of the Omnissiah, the living mediator between flesh and machine, the promise that limitation can be corrected, that mankind may be raised closer to a perfect design. The Imperium's wider faith tolerates this creed because the alliance with Mars is older than most institutions, and because to forbid it would be to sever the hand that forges the sword. Yet the Mechanicus does not worship with hymns alone. It worships with procedures. Knowledge is scripture. A schematic is a prayer written in lines and angles. A data slate, a reliquary containing a saint's worth of instruction. They hunger for the lost standard template constructs of humanity's golden age, those STC systems and fragments that once allowed colonies to build entire civilizations from approved templates. A single fragment can elevate a forge world, purchase fleets, or ignite wars. A complete STC would be a revelation so profound it could reorder power across the Imperium. And still, for all their hunger, the Mechanicus fears invention. They remember, through parable, through broken records, through inherited dread, that mankind once built mines of iron and paid in blood. Discovery is permitted when it can be framed as recovery. Innovation is treated as a knife held by the blade, useful but perilously close to heresy. Their contradictions are not accidents. They are armor. They revere logic, yet express devotion as ritual, because ritual enforces discipline where curiosity might run wild. They insist the universe can be understood, yet demand that understanding descend through hierarchy. Permission from magus to adept, from priest to servant. In the glow of reactor temples, a tech priest may calculate trajectories with clinical precision, then pause to anoint a cogitator casing with holy oils. Not because the oil is strictly required, but because the machine's spirit must be respected. To outsiders, it looks like superstition stapled to engineering. To Mars, it is coherence. A machine is not dead matter, but a vessel of spirit, and spirit must be appeased if function is to endure. You can see their creed in their bodies. Crimson robes move through forge light like blood through a surgical theater. Hoods shadow faces that are often no longer faces at all, only masks, respirators, vox grills, and lens stacks that refocus with insect patience. Brass and iron replace flesh with the casual finality of a priest exchanging a worn prayer book for a newer one. Mechadendrites coil from spines like metal serpents tipped with tools, injectors, auspex nodes, and data spikes that click into ports with a sound like teeth. Their voices, filtered through vox emitters and layered with machine harmonics, can sound like choirs arguing inside a single throat. Not all who serve Mars are priests in the common sense. Skitari are sanctified soldiers, living weapons bound by command protocols and devotion codes, their senses threaded into the noosphere, their reactions tuned to a rhythm that flesh alone cannot keep. Muscles are reinforced, organs are regulated, perception is sharpened into something almost inhuman. Around them labor adepts, lex mechanics, data scribes, and engineers, unseen arteries of the priesthood, keeping the whole machine of war supplied with attention. And in the deepest shadow are servitors, the darkest solution to human weakness. Lobotomized, rewired, repurposed, the body reduced to a chassis that obeys without thought. The Mechanicus calls it utility. The Imperium calls it punishment. The result is a walking tool built from a broken person. A forge world is a planet remade into an altar. Manufactoria sprawl like metal continents. Reactor temples throb beneath armored domes. Scrap deserts spread where oceans once lay, and the air itself becomes an engineered atmosphere of ash, metal dust, and incense designed to soothe machines and sanctify labor. Orbital shipyards hang above like rings of iron, birthing hulls that will one day carry war across the stars. Beneath all of it lie data vaults, behind cipher wards and electro wards, protected by guardians who would sooner kill than allow unclean hands to touch sacred patterns. And each forge world is a kingdom unto itself. Mars stands foremost, but it does not share easily, and it does not forgive quickly. Other great forges cling to their own doctrines, rites, and favored patterns, bound to the priesthood, but never fully unified by it. Alliances are negotiated in supply quotas, access keys, and sealed archives. Rivalries manifest as delays wrapped in polite formalities, shipments that await the completion of rites, regiments that receive inferior variants because a forge world has chosen to be offended. Their politics are not loud, they are catastrophic. In some places, even the faithful queue in silence for the privilege of service, filing past cog-toothed shrines in data-tive processions where confessions are made in serial numbers and biometric scans, and absolution arrives as an access grant. Within this industrial church, authority rises through specialized orders that resemble theology made operational. There are magi who devote themselves to war, whose presence on a battlefield is a mobile shrine of targeting data and hymn code. There are those who devote themselves to logic, treating strategy as equation and loss as acceptable expenditure. There are janitors who study flesh as a machine to be corrected, and cybernetica masters who awaken ancient automata and speak to them in languages older than most empires. Above them stand archmagi, each a legend of augmentation and ambition. At the apex sits the Fabricator General of Mars, an office whose influence can bend imperial policy without ever drawing a blade. Their power is most visible in the quiet places where war is decided before it begins. In a void dock, an engineer crawls through the ribcage of a cruiser's plasma heart, palms slick with sacred oils, reciting the rite of ignition while warning runes flare like angry scripture. Around him, voidsmen pray in the ways they understand, because they know a reactor is not merely a machine. It is an animal that can be soothed or provoked. On a muddy front line, a Lehman Russ lies crippled, track sheared, engine choking, its crew tasting smoke and promethium through clenched teeth. An engineer kneels in the shell fire, sets a data spike into a whining access port, and murmurs the litany of unbinding through a vox mask, as if speaking to a wounded beast. The tank answers with a cough of life, a shudder through the hull, gauges returning to the green. The machine's spirit has been coaxed back from sulk and silence. The crew lives another hour. The Imperium calls it repair. Mars calls it communion. At the center of the Mechanicus's ambition is the quest for knowledge, and its most coveted relic is the STC. Explorator fleets slip into dead systems and forgotten ruins, their holds filled with servitors, Skitarii escorts, and adepts hungry for discovery. In the dark of a lifeless station, an explorator magos walks through dust that has not been disturbed in millennia, optics clicking, mechadendrites tasting the air for radiation and corruption signatures. Behind him, Skitarii advance with weapons raised, not because they expect mere raiders, but because knowledge is guarded by worse things than thieves. A sealed vault door yields only after cipher keys and correct litanies, spoken in the right cadence, in the right sequence. Inside lies a broken cogitator core, half corrupted, half miraculous. To the Mechanicus, this is not salvage. It is scripture recovered from a burning library. They will bleed worlds for fragments like this and call the cost acceptable. Those who enter the priesthood are shaped by it until they are no longer wholly human. Some are tithed as children for aptitude, surrendered to forge temples like offerings. Some are raised among data scribes, their earliest lessons spoken in Bin Harik. Some are ambitious nobles seeking forbidden knowledge, or the long shadow of immortality augmentation can promise. The transformation is slow and deliberate. Study grinds individuality into function. Implants begin as tools and end as identity. Memory partitions cage dangerous curiosity. Replacements remove weakness and replace it with endurance. The flesh is weak, they intone, not as insult, but diagnosis. The machine endures. The machine obeys its design. The machine can be perfected, and perfection is a form of worship. On the battlefield, their roles become doctrine made visible. Tech priests command as both generals and priests, issuing blessings that are also command protocols. Skitarii enact obedience with terrifying efficiency, a choir of cyber soldiers moving as one. Electro-priests stride like living storms, bodies made conduit for the motive force, crackling with energies that can scour flesh or jolt failing systems back into compliance. Around them trudge the heavy saints of Mars, automata and war engines guided by hymn code, their movements the measured punctuation of a larger prayer. Even their weapons speak their creed. Radiation, phosphor, and searing plasma treated as sanctified forces rather than horrors, deployed with the calm certainty of those who value function above fear. Mechanicus warfare is always half battle, half ritual. Before a weapon is fired, it is blessed. Before a machine is awakened, it is addressed. The rite of ignition, the canticle of repair, the litany of unbinding. These are not theatrics to Mars. They are the operating language of a civilization that believes spirit and function are entwined. Their relics reflect this. Sanctified weapons etched with litanies, plasma coils treated like reliquaries, rad engines anointed and sealed, data tomes chained to lecterns, cipher keys carried in locked cases. Their archives are guarded not only against thieves, but against corruption, because scrap code spreads like blight, turning loyal systems into shrieking hazards. To purge it is exorcism by logic and flame. Isolate, cleanse, burn, and pray the machine spirit forgives what must be done to save it. Within the cult, some figures become more than rank. They become symbols. There is the Fabricator General as archetype, the unseen hand that can redirect fleets by approving, delaying, or denying the flow of sanctified designs. There is the War Dominus, a tech priest commander whose presence on a battlefield feels like a moving altar. Vox choirs embedded in his armor, broadcasting praise and target solutions in the same breath. There is the Skitarii Marshal, once a human officer, now a living node of command, devotion reduced to a hard, shining edge. And there is the controversial genius, embodied most famously by Archmagos Belisarius Cawl, an intellect associated with new miracles that have reshaped imperial arsenals, and a name that provokes both reverence and suspicion. Because progress, even when it saves worlds, casts the shadow of heresy. In the same breath, the Mechanicus remembers its warning. The traitor Fabricator General Kelbor Hal of the Heresy Age. Proof that devotion and ambition can turn on the Imperium like a sharpened blade. When the Mechanicus fights for itself, the causes are rarely sentimental. These are crusades for artifacts, for fragments of the past, for manufactoria and archives that must not be lost. A forge world under siege becomes an apocalypse of industry. Production lines turned into fortifications, conveyor belts repurposed as ammunition routes, reactor temples guarded like hearts. Skitarii hold choke points with the calm of machinery. Servitors haul shells through fire without flinching. Tech priests fight not only to save lives, but to save templates, because to Mars, the loss of a sanctioned design is not merely a tactical defeat, it is spiritual amputation. When they fight alongside Space Marines, Guard, and Navy, their role reveals itself in the most brutal way, through what stops working when they are gone. A crusade can have courage and numbers, yet still fail if its engines cannot be kept alive and its weapons cannot be renewed and supplied. The Imperium is a vast war machine held together by prayer, steel, and logistics. The Mechanicus is the institution that understands the machine's language well enough to keep it breathing. That is why commanders negotiate with Mars with careful tongues, and why a single engineer can be worth more than a platoon when the battlefield becomes a graveyard of broken armor and stalled engines. In the modern era, the strain on this arrangement has sharpened into crisis. The Great Rift has severed roots, isolated forge worlds, and turned once reliable supply chains into deadly gambles. Whole manufactoria kingdoms have been cut off from Mars, forced to ration sacred parts and adapt rites to scarcity. Explorator missions have become more desperate, driven by the knowledge that what is lost may never be recovered, and what is needed may not arrive in time. Where the Imperium sees catastrophe, the Mechanicus sees a dangerous equation: preserve doctrine and risk collapse, or bend doctrine and risk damnation. So the old argument intensifies, preservation versus progress, until it becomes a quiet civil tension humming beneath every council and every sealed archive. Some cling to strict patterns, insisting that survival depends on obedience to sanctioned designs, that the line between recovery and invention must not be crossed. Others argue that the galaxy has changed too much for caution alone, and necessity has already begun to force compromises. Pattern variants circulate without proper Martian seals. Expedient edits are justified as emergency restorations. Interface logic emerges that looks uncomfortably close to forbidden source code. They do not announce these things as rebellion. They wrap them in litanies, stamp them with provisional approvals, and insist the Omnissiah understands urgency. Yet through schism, scarcity, and war, the forges do not fall silent. Vox choirs continue their measured chants. Conveyor lines keep moving. Red-robed silhouettes stand over glowing furnaces with the patience of beings who measure time in centuries and maintenance cycles. Their faith does not require hope. It requires function. Their devotion does not require comfort. It requires continuity. In the end, the Adeptus Mechanicus remains the Imperium's beating industrial heart and its most dangerous priesthood. It keeps humanity alive by maintaining machines no one fully understands, and it does so with a faith that looks like science and a science that behaves like faith. On worlds where the air itself is poison and the horizon is iron, they whisper prayers to the Omnissiah as they tighten bolts, seal reactor housings, and wake ancient engines from dormancy. The forges glow, the smoke rises, the Benheric cant flickers through the dark like distant stars. Confirm, confirm, praise, praise. And while the galaxy burns, they continue their work, building the tools of endless war.